So this video is sort of like a continuation of the 1A. This is the back of the 1A form. This is where you see the outline for what to include in your research plan and your project summary. Every project needs one of these. This has to be written prior to you going through the experiment. Something that I cannot stress with you enough is the B option here. If changes are made during research, such changes can be added to the original research plan as an addendum, but you must notify me of that. So you should notify me and then your IRB of that one. And I'll take care of letting your review board know as long as you let me know. But you absolutely must notify us of changes. This was a significant problem for somebody last year. Something to use as a guide is all of these things should be areas that are very obviously included in your research plan. So you should explain the rationale, you should explain your research question, your hypotheses that you have, any kind of engineering goals if your project is not like a traditional experimental project, expected outcomes that you have, and then you have to explain your procedures, risk and safety, and data analysis in detail. The number one reason people get these sent back to them is they do not spend enough time explaining the procedure and risk and safety. The clues that I'll give you here is for your procedure. Show the form that you typed up, like show your research plan to someone who is not familiar with it and see if they'd be able to explain back to you how to follow the steps. Because this is something your IRB will use when they're evaluating your project. If they don't really understand how you're going to be conducting your research, you're not going to get approval. It'll get bounced back to you. You'll need to add more details. The other thing is the risk and safety. If you have either a 1C or a Form 3, those are both things that the IRB are going to be looking at very carefully. So the Form 3, which you should know from doing the form wizard if you have to fill that out, but Form 3 deals with any kind of hazardous material or substance. That is something you have to explain very carefully in the risk and safety area. So like, how are you going to mitigate your exposure to things? How are you going to properly dispose of items? How are you going to use them carefully during your experimentation? So if you have that one, the Form 3, risk and safety, is even more important than in a normal research plan. Also for the procedure, if you're working with a facility, if you're working with a college or other institution, you have to fill out a 1C form, then please be extra detailed in your procedure section, right? You should still be able to go through and explain like what you're doing in each step to a level where somebody could duplicate your experiment. But if you're working with a research institute, it should be very clear what steps of the project you are doing, and then like what steps are being done by a TA or a professor or somebody else. Down below here are extra things you have to include if you require some of these extra forms. So if you are working with human participants, vertebrate animal research, if you have potentially hazardous biological agents or hazardous chemicals, I already talked to you about this one. That's going to be something that's especially important for you to talk about in risk and safety if you do have those things. That's really the key for this, is to just fully explain what you're doing in your experiment. If you have some of these extra components, which you should well know from going through and doing the form wizard and everything, please make sure you read those extra details carefully. You really cannot include enough detail here. So you always err on that side, and you should be okay for the research plan.